When last we left our heroes. So the players had just recently saved the town of Glennon from a group of gnolls, and they were off sort of seeking what their next thing would be. They were trying to figure out, what do we do next, and how can we maybe make a little money or make a little name for ourselves as we go off to figure out the next thing. They needed to figure out who this Landcaster person was who had killed Phaedra's family and village. They also needed to figure out what was this wild magic prismy thing killing all the trees in and around Glennon. So they were headed off to the largest city that they knew of, the seat of the Duke in Felton. Yeah, Felton. And they were trying to figure out, okay, that's where we're on our way to. And I had sort of given them some encounters and everything on the way as they were traveling. And they also ran into this town of Fenlock. And we're trying to figure out why all these mosquitoes were plaguing this town. And they had spoken with some of the villagers there and realized that there was a Marsh Matron type individual living out there. And she was apparently really mad and had sent the mosquitoes off after the players. And that's sort of where we had caught up to here. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit different. This is obviously, no for my players because they're going to hear what's coming next. But I want to share with you the outline for the adventure that I have, and then how it went a little different and how I sort of stuck with it and adapted and things like that. So I'm going to share with you my big picture thoughts and plans, and we can sort of see how that unfolds. So my plan is this. Obviously, there is the problem, the inciting incident. These mosquitoes are bothering the villagers, and they seek someone to solve that problem. The players are that solution. However, I didn't want it to be sort of very straightforward. I want there to be a little bit of a twist. Obviously, the players suspect the Marsh Matron. The players look for a twist, right? Oftentimes, especially I have really experienced players. Every one of my players has been or is currently, I think all of them are currently, DMs for their own groups. And so, obviously, everyone's really experienced. They sort of know the structure and flow of an adventure, of how monsters work, all of those things. And so, they look for a twist. And I think, especially video game players also look for a twist. What's that twist going to be? So, I like to give the players a freebie, a free twist. And then bury a second twist that they didn't see coming. So there's this Marsh Matron, this old witch who lives out in the swamp. And these players are very smart, and so they can pat themselves on the back because they have correctly figured out that this is a hag. And because they know that, there's sort of this meta knowledge, and there would be some in-world as well, that hags often come in covens. They come in groups of 3. And so the players get to pat themselves on the back again because they've figured out that little hidden twist of, aha, there's a hag. And not only is it going to be a hag, it's going to be a whole coven of hags. We're not going to be able to fight them. We're going to have to make a deal on our way out. And hags love deals. So that's going to be the scope and the shape of the adventure. But what they did not know is that there was also another faction at play in this swamp, and that is sort of the hidden twist. The Marsh Matron, the hag, is not behind any of this, and that is sort of the twist that the players are not aware of. So this is what I know going in. There's the swamp, they've had mosquitoes and everything going on, all this stuff, great. There is a Marsh Matron. The players guess, assume, suspect that there are 3 hags. There are not. There's only one. And that was a really fun situation where the hag, they meet the hag later, and we'll talk about all that. They meet the hag and talk to her and do all this stuff, and they try to figure out these things, but the hag is sort of playing up that there's more of them, my sisters, all these kinds of things. But there's only one hag. And the hag is not responsible for any of this. The hag has been locked out of part of the swamp by a new player, a new faction. There's a tribe of kobolds at play here, and the kobolds have some sort of powerful leader, and that is the entity, the creature that is sort of making these mosquitoes happen. And the players have to figure all of that out, figure out who's actually responsible. They have to treat us and deal with the hag, which is going to be super fun and creepy. They also have to fight and battle the kobolds and sort of negotiate between these 2 warring tribes. Neither of them really good guys, but can they get out of this without battling? And we'll see what that sort of looks like. So that is sort of the scope of this adventure, sort of the problems, the obvious plot twists coming, and also the hidden plot twists coming. So the players venture into the swamp at night. I thought for sure they would rest and go back in the day, but no, they went at night because these players are incredibly intelligent. No, they went out at night and were ambushed in the night by a group of kobolds. And they sort of were fighting off these kobolds, and obviously it's a relatively easy encounter. They were, at this point, 4th level players, and yeah, beat the kobolds pretty easily. And they sort of managed to capture one alive, did the whole interrogation thing where they're trying to figure some stuff out, and they learn quite a bit of information about the major players in the swamp from the kobold that they had captured. And this kobold agrees to lead them to the Marsh Matron in exchange for being let free, being let go. And so the players sort of get most of the way to the Marsh Matron with this kobold in tow, sort of get pointed out, that's where the Marsh Matron lives, peace. And then the kobold leaves, the players let him go. And the players then have to deal with this hag. And let me tell you, hags are one of those creatures that are just such fertile soil for a DM, because you get to play up all of these little elements, the figure of the hag and being so big and large and like 7 foot tall, hunched over, and the skin and the warty and gross and slimy and being very creepy. Like, hags are so fun to roleplay as a DM. There's also this element of you don't really know how powerful they are. All of my players, again being DMs, are incredibly familiar with the monster manual, monster stat blocks, but they also know the shtick as a DM. They know how easy it is and how necessary it is to homebrew a bunch of stuff. So they know the deal. They know that I'm going to homebrew or tweak or add or modify or add abilities to pretty much everything they fight, because that's something I enjoy doing, and also because I think the 5th edition monster manual has some pretty garbage monsters. Not just the monster manual, but all of the books. I think most of 5e monster design is pretty terrible. If you want more of my chunk on that, I have a video on why 5th edition monster design is terrible and why 4th edition had it right, and they need to go back to that, but I often steal 4th edition abilities because of that. And so, yeah, the players are sort of seeing this hag, and they don't really know how strong or powerful the hag is. There's sort of the hint that there are more than one hags in this little group. But there's not. There is just the one hag. And so sort of they're going back and forth. They make this little deal, and the hag says, listen, I've been locked out of that part of the swamp. I want to go back. I have, mushrooms and slime that only grow in the eastern part of the swamp. I would like to go back there too. So I'll tell you what. If you can make the kobold tribe and their leader leave my swamp, then I will tell you something that you want to know. One of the nice things about hags is that they are so kind of mysterious, witchy vibes that you can kind of do whatever you would like. And so I just sort of name drop Landcaster as well as Mysterious Prism in the forest. How does this hag know about those two specific things? Doesn't really matter. To me, I think those are things the hag could know about, because hags like to know about secrets and lore going on in their area. And those are things that the players care about. They're things that the players want to know about. And so I, drop those, and players are like, oh man, we definitely want to know about those things. Yeah, let's go figure this out. And so I try to make sure when possible to leave quests open-ended for the players. What do I mean by that? I mean, I specifically did not say, kill these people. I said, I as the hag don't care if those people are dead or alive. I just want to be able to go get what I want from over there safely and without being bothered. If you, the players, can figure out a way to do that doesn't involve killing them, relocating them, bribing them, making some kind of a deal or a pact or whatever, then feel free to. If you want to just cut their heads off, that's fine too. But I like for quest givers to sort of say there's maybe lots of different ways to do this. It's up to you. The rules are not kill that thing. The rules are get me access to that place. And so sort of leaves a bit of open-endedness in their interaction. And so that was a really fun scene and encounter with the hag, sort of playing all of that up, being very creepy and mysterious, sort of striking deals where I can with the players, trying to bait them into accepting more deals. And there's going to be a return encounter with that hag, obviously, as they go back to cash in, and I'm really excited about that. The players then left that sort of creepy situation. And I tried very badly to get the players to rest in and around where the hag was. I didn't know what was going to happen if they did, but I really wanted them to sort of fall asleep near a hag. That can't possibly go well, right? They did not take the bait. They decided they were going to trek all the way back to the village, out of the swamp. Sort of levels of exhaustion, this whole thing, crashed wherever they could, got their rests, and decided to then head back into the swamp to the eastern half to confront more kobolds. And more kobolds they did find. Kobolds working with sturges, actually, as they were battling these kobolds outside of their lair. Really fun combat encounter. Kobolds had some high ground. This time was quite a bit different. I sort of had 2 different combat encounters with those kobolds, taking up most of the session, in addition to the role playing with the hag. And so the one encounter was sort of the kobolds being often very melee and getting up close with the players, and having sort of 1 or 2 people in the back line. And that was relatively easy for the players because obviously kobolds are very squishy, and so they were able to just hack down the kobolds and sort of had this false sense of security. But they had a kobold who had survived that encounter, and so the second encounter was much more dangerous because the kobolds were sort of set up on some cliffs. They had high ground. They were shooting down at the players. There were more kobolds this time, so it was a very tough situation for the players. They sort of had to set up a wall of defense. One of the players, the bard, Bria, used some kind of a spell, some kind of wall spell or like a growth of vines or something, to block off line of sight, but that meant the players also didn't have line of sight, and so they would pop out to make their ranged attacks, but the kobolds were holding their actions and they would pepper them as soon as they came out. And so it was a very kind of tense back and forth battle that was very tough for the players. And I enjoyed sort of playing up the strategic patterns of kobolds, and so it was interesting sort of having 2 very different encounters, even though they were the same types of creatures, even the same stat blocks in many cases. And so the players sort of found themselves having killed many kobolds, but they don't know how many kobolds there are. Many kobolds they killed, and then venturing forward into this final cave. They sort of had to take a rest, preparing themselves for what was to come, getting back any resources that they could over a short rest, and then marching forward into this large cave where they knew the kobolds would be maybe nesting. Maybe they would find whatever the kobold's leader was. And they had heard whispers and mentions, and I'm not sure if you have already guessed, but at this point, the players were able to guess what was leading the kobolds. Let me tell you, it's not a kobold. It was something very interesting, but we will find that out next week on When Last We Left Our Heroes. So once again, thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time.